Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. On the podcast today is Peter Lane. Peter is an accountant who specializes in the unique accounting challenges that designers and other artistic professionals have in their business. With 16 years of tax and accounting experience, Peter is a proven expert in helping interior designers do their taxes and all those other financial duties that maybe they didn't learn in art school. Peter and I really jumped into a really great conversation about the role of an accountant in your interior design business, and also why having one is important, how to vet an accountant to see if it's a good fit for you, and really about making sure they understand your business model and all the different things that you do in your business, really understanding your niche. We also chat a bit about the different types of business entities and structures, the new tax laws that are coming into effect, and the impacts that might have on our business. And then why working with an accountant is important, because they're doing more than just those day-to-day accounting things, but they really are to be a trusted advisor. And so if you're going to take advice from somebody, you want to make sure it's somebody that you are in alignment with. I promise we're not going to get super numbers heavy to make you want to run away, and we do keep the conversation very relatable, but it's really some good information as you are maybe looking to bring on an accountant for the first time. Maybe you are starting to get that ick feeling that your accountant doesn't fit, and this is just a good reminder of some of the things to consider as you go on the hunt for that advisor that is going to be a big part of your business. So enjoy the conversation. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Peter, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Hi, Michelle. Nice to meet you. It's great to be here.
Great. I'm excited to talk to you because as we made a quick comment before we came online to record, we both like numbers. We both like the accounting aspects. We like the order, if you will, of how the numbers fit together to support our business and to give us metrics. And so I'm super excited to be able to have a conversation with you today.
I'm always up for someone who's willing to listen to me ramble on about numbers. So it's good to be here.
Good. I think we're in good company. So tell us a little bit about your business that you have today, Peter.
Yeah, so my business is called The Designer CPA. We're a CPA firm. We're a virtual CPA firm that concentrates in business owners in the design industry, specifically interior designers. We have quite a bit of interior designers. So if there's a niche inside a niche, I guess that would be what it is. And we service design business owners in the design industry all over the country.
And is there a certain size of interior design business that you work with, or you work with them from startup all the way into the multi-million-dollar firms?
Yep, we'll work with anybody. So the people that are just starting out, I actually just talked to a couple of prospects over the last 2 months that literally they're being proactive. They haven't even started their business yet, and they're trying to find their team before they start, just to get going in the right direction. And then I have clients that I've had for years that have 5 to 8 employees, and their gross revenue is in the millions. So
okay, yeah, my business is the same way. I've worked with them from inception of the whole business all the way through to the multi-million-dollar firms. So it's kind of nice. You get to see the broad range of everything and work with it. And, while some of the challenges very much are the same, some of the challenges are very different, when you've scaled up or scaled back.
Yep, absolutely.
Did you, Peter, always know that you wanted to go into accounting, or did you immediately think when you were younger, I want to work with numbers and what's the best? How did you get into that?
Oh, so in high school, I actually thought that someday I would there was a time where I thought I might actually be a minister for a little while, and then it turned into I like teaching. So I had my heart set on teaching, and then I love numbers, but I hate science. So my senior year of high school, I got my schedule in August, whatever, and I had chemistry and physics, and I was like, how did this happen?
In the same year?
Yeah, in the same quarter or same semester. Yeah, I'm like, there's no way I'm taking both of these things. Like, I was like, if I'm going to be a teacher, I'm going to be a history teacher. But I hate science. So anyway, I went into my guidance counselor and I said, you got to get me out of physics. Yeah, do anything to get me out of physics. So they said, well, the accounting is available, but that's for kids that aren't going to college. I'm like, what?
What?
So, yeah, that's what they told me. I still remember that. And I was like, well, listen, I'm going to sit in the back. I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to be a pain in the butt, but you got to get me into that class. I'm not taking physics. Anyway, long story short, I had one of the best teachers that I had in my school career for accounting. And it just clicked. I loved it. I was ahead of everyone, and I kind of, as dorky as it sounds, I would, be 2 chapters ahead. I was always trying to learn more and more, and it just came natural to me. So as the year went on, I got accepted to college. I had to call them, and I said, I want to switch into majoring in accounting. And then after college, I got a job at a smaller firm where we had to do tax and auditing. And then later on, I realized that I was more of a tax guy, that I loved taxes too. So as boring as all that sounds, that's where my journey led me to.
So a couple of things that cracked me up about that. The first is I would never hire an accountant who hadn't gone to college. I just personally would be like, no. Right?
Yeah, I know. I don't know where my guidance counselor was even thinking. But
right. So even the thought of you don't have to go to college, so go take accounting classes. I mean, most of us these days, we would run far from that. But so I think that's funny. But when I was in school, I remember taking a course. It was almost like I don't know if it was a personal finance course. It might have been something like that. It was one of the things we had to take in our senior year. And we had a section of the course that taught us how to do our own taxes. And I was the nerd in that class. I loved it. I thought it was like this puzzle, and look how it all fits together. And now look how you can make this work to your advantage, or,
Absolutely.
I just loved it. And I'm sure everybody around me, but, I didn't open my mouth and tell everybody how much I loved it, except for a couple of really close friends.
Yeah.
The rest of them would have thought I was crazy. But I did. I loved it. And then my first job out of college, I wanted to be a teacher as well, but I didn't think they made enough money. And so I realized my mother was a school teacher in the public schools, and she actually taught science classes. And I just remember thinking, I'm not doing everything she does. She loves those kids. She puts in the hours, and they are not compensated enough. So I thought, I'm not doing that. So anyway, I went to school and signed up to go into accounting. So this is funny. So you changed into accounting. I got into accounting, and nobody would hardly talk to me. Everybody stayed in their little corner. They kind of had their head down with their paper. And I called my guidance counselor in college, and I said, get me out of there. I can't sit around these people who have no life. All their life is numbers, and everything's in red and black. And I see the world in 5,000 colors, and they're not talking to me.
Yeah.
So I moved over and did the MIS, Management Information Systems track, with a concentration in some of the accounting. And then my first job was with Dun & Bradstreet Software, and I built financial accounting packages. So I still got the accounting, but I got the people portion of it. And I laugh because, software developers aren't much different than accountants, but that's who I got paired with. And so I just have to giggle at the way that it all works out. And then now, a heavy part of what I do in coaching is educating and teaching. And I know that your practice, that's part of what you do as well, and we'll talk about it as we go a little further, but you also want to have a relationship with your clients and educate them on their numbers and help them understand, not just spew out a couple of reconciliation reports and income statements and take a step away.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
I cringe at that traditional accountant that you said, like, no one's talking to me. I've had jobs where, you try to be social with people, and they're just not. It's just more numbers, no personality. And I'm like, oh man, no wonder we get a bad rap as accountants with the general public. Man, this is just, it's brutal.
It is. I mean, that was the whole reason I left it as a degree, because my classmates were so heads down and not relational. And I have a heavy need to be relational. I like people. I like to talk to people. I like to understand. And I think, to me, numbers create order, but I don't think everything is so numbers that we lose the personal touch. And so that's, I would say even just one of the differences for me in this industry is left brain, right brain, and being somewhere in the middle. And I think you bring a dose of that to the accounting as well.
Yep, absolutely.
So when you started and you worked for the other firm, what made you decide to go out on your own?
Oh gosh, I couldn't stand that cutthroat, just that what we just talked about. But I always kind of had that entrepreneurial sense in me that I wanted to have my own business someday. So as I was paying my dues in my early 20s, I was like, okay, I was always thinking about, like, what do I need to do in order to get out on my own and, successfully be able to be on my own, because I knew the only way I was going to be happy was to be able to make decisions on my own and not have someone else always telling me, like, or getting in trouble because I didn't initial a work paper on, but I got a whole tax return right. That kind of silly stuff like that, where I was like, what, someday I want to be on my own.
How long have you had your own company?
I started my company in 2012.
Okay.
So I've been doing accounting and tax since I graduated from college. It's all I've ever done. I taught college a little bit part-time at night, but it's all I ever did. But it wasn't until I passed the CPA exam that I was like, okay, that was my motivation. I was like, if you pass the CPA exam, you can start your own business and, finally be able to do what you want.
I love it. And did you plan for profitability from the very beginning in your company?
I've always been like, I'm an accountant, so I guess I've always thought about budgeting that stuff. It wasn't years later till I read the book Profit First, but I always had like a startup budget before the business even started, and I would always work hard to kind of sock away money where it was like, when I'd have it. If I wanted to invest in the future in something else to grow my business, I would have that kind of put away in a savings account so that it wouldn't be a big burden on the business. So yeah, I always had that sense of profitability.
Yeah, because, coming at it, it's interesting. I've shared, some of my journey, even though I knew it all. I don't mean like I knew it all, like I know everything, but that would be nice. My family might say I think I know it all, but meaning that I knew, the high level accounting. I understood that you needed to, bring in more money than you were spending. I got all that. But I'll say that in mine, I kind of got wrapped up at the very beginning in, if you know eMyth, the technician work. That
Yep.
I wasn't always looking at my business as the manager or as the entrepreneur. And I had kind of assumed that with the money coming in and the money going out, it always kind of, and I hear people say this all the time. I started my business back in 2000, and that particular business was not started with a lot of forethought. It was started because somebody rang my doorbell and asked me to do something for them and they would pay me. So it didn't start with a full business plan and with, like you said, a budget for beginning capital. It didn't start with any of that. Now, when I started my coaching business back in 2013, it absolutely started with all of that. There was no way I was going to go backwards in everything that I had learned the hard way. But when I started initially as a drapery workroom and doing the interior design pieces for textiles, I did not start it with the full plan. And so even though I had head knowledge, I had not put it into action until I kind of got caught and realized, oh snap, I didn't make any money this year, or my net profit zero, or it's negative, or how in the world did that happen?
Yep.
Like where am I not watching? Or I would get caught where I might be 6 months behind on reconciling my accounts. Wasn't that I wasn't putting everything in QuickBooks, but I might have missed a thing here or two that if I'd have reconciled every month and constantly looked at it, I would have been able to catch it. But now I'm 6 months out. I can't remember what in the world that weird transaction was for, or something funky had happened that month. And I'm trying to do what I call forensic accounting, where I'm trying to dig back through everything and remember when, heck, I can't remember last week. How do I expect myself to remember one transaction from 6 months ago? You know what I'm saying? And so,
Absolutely.
I know that we can all come into this business knowing what we know, but that doesn't always mean that we put it into practice. And I run into a lot of business owners that their story is very similar to mine, and that they come in working as a technician. Yours is a little different because your technician is also what it is you do, right? It's
Yeah.
that the profit, the numbers, the money is all there. But even the way we define profits can change over time. I remember I defined profit at the very beginning of my business journey as having the money to buy, soccer cleats if my kid needed them, or, just trying to make up maybe some of the extras in our household, where now my definition of profit is wildly different than that. Not to say those are bad. It's just very different.
Yeah.
How have you seen your maybe internal definition of profit change or grow over time?
So I would say when I first started my business, I also was consulting for someone else. And my wife at the time, we didn't have kids yet, so she had a full-time job, and that full-time job provided great benefits. So the side business was kind of more of like something to do where almost, because I'm a service business, almost all of it was profit. And I never spent it. So it was nice. And then we moved to the suburbs after we had twins, and she went from the full-time job to the part-time job type of thing. So having more responsibilities like that when it comes to like health insurance and, making a certain amount of money so you can pay your personal expenses as well as the business expenses, has switched my priorities. And so it's completely switched the size of my business, or my goals for the size of my business, and that kind of stuff. And it's also changed the details of my budgeting. So
Absolutely. And we see that with our clients too, don't we, Peter? That they may start like almost maybe opposite, in that they start very part-time quite often, especially if we have women coming into the industry. They may start part-time while they're raising their children. And then, as their children grow and as their days get longer and they have more hours that they can put towards the office or towards their interior design, they do that. And so
absolutely.
that,
Yep.
right, that idea of pricing and profits and how much money you're making, it does change and morph. And I think that's very natural and organic for a business to move. One of the things I know that we probably both agree on is I always encourage those that I work with to charge as if they are the sole income, meaning don't start discounting just because you're the secondary income. Mm-hmm. Charge as if you may not have the same amount of hours. So even if you charge the same as everybody, around you, and I'm not talking price collusion or anything, but just saying you're charging in the same realm of reasonable for the work that you're providing. Just the fact that you're working less is already going to have you make less in most cases. Right. But don't go cut it down to half price because you feel bad that you're not working as much. Because at some point, when you go to raise those prices to where they really need to be, you're going to lose your customers, because they're not going to jump from $75 an hour to $150 an hour in a month. They're not going to do it.
Yep. It takes time. Yep. I mean, in my business, as I've grown, I started out as like a traditional, in 2012, I started out as a traditional, I was taking anything just to take anything to have the extra work. And then when I decided to niche, that completely changes what you're offering and what you're pricing out at. So I still have the legacy clients out there that I have to, I'm providing them a different service. And yeah, it's tough because when they look at prices and that kind of stuff, they're just like, what do you mean that's what you're charging? So it's a lot harder to have those clients grow with the price quickly and stay. Yeah, chances are they're not expecting it.
That's right. So how did you decide to niche in general? And then what made you choose interior design as your niche?
So when I was living in Boston at the time, and I was consulting for someone, I was working on the side, and so the gentleman I was consulting for, he knew a bookkeeper who just so happened to refer him, like between 5 and 10 interior design firms of different sizes in the Boston area. So it was more, you do a lot of work with tax season, and then in the summertime it was quiet. So I was a consultant. So if there was no work to do, there was no work to do. And it just so happened that a design firm needed some help with some reports, and I was just going to go in and kind of look at their numbers, fix their stuff basically, and get out of there. And then when I got there, I realized that their bookkeeper had kind of quit, that they had a lot more than just one report. And I said, yeah, I got plenty of time to help you. And then I found that I was out there a lot. And so that summer, I had a lot of time. I was able to learn I had to teach myself basically, because when I looked at their numbers, I was like, man, this is a lot different than any other industry that I've ever seen. So I learned that, and I grew more, and then I started working more and more with the design firms while I was there. And then when I left and I went out on my own, a lot of them came with me because we had built a relationship. And so when I had decided, I had read up on niching and that kind of stuff, and I was like, that would be really interesting. So I read a book, and they said you should take a look at your clients, just names of your clients, and just kind of put a mark next to the ones that you get along with, or you're happy when they call, or you provide the most value to, they appreciate it, and just see how it ends up. Don't look at, what they do, just their names, figure it out. And so I did, and I wrote 10 clients down on a piece of paper, and 6 or 7 of them were interior designers. So there, I was like, okay, there it is. There's my niche. So it all kind of worked itself out like that. It was like fate, I guess.
Yeah, you made the point that in interior design accounting, it is huge. It's like the construction industry, and it hits, because it is construction, right? It's like interior
Mm-hmm.
construction, but it hits almost every single aspect, if not every single aspect of the accounting system. It is not a simple process.
No way. And it's so important to be working with people that have clients or have that understanding of the industry, because there's a lot of accountants out there that say they understand, but they really don't.
Yeah, I know. I get part of my offering is to do the financial review with my client, and we go all the way back and talk about their clients and all those things. But when I'm looking at their profit and loss statement that they send me, or their balance sheet, and I see things, I'm like, I don't know that your bookkeeper really understands.
Absolutely.
I don't think they get what we're doing here. If they tell you you don't need cost of goods, you can just throw it all into the expense category. We got a problem. Like,
Oh
this is a
yeah.
problem. Or if they try to dump everything into one bucket, we don't have the data that we need. And kind of my thought on it is, and I would love to hear your thought on it. I like for, and this will get kind of detailed for some of our people, but I really like for that income statement, that profit and loss statement, to be, and it varies, right? But I want it to be detailed enough that we can make decisions, but not so detailed that we're bogged down. We should be able to look at it and pretty quickly understand our profit centers, understand our cost centers, and be able to make some high-level decisions very quickly. If I've got to now dig down 14 layers under any particular topic or category to find the answers, that's taking me way too much time. But I also don't want to have so much detail that every blasted transaction has its own line on a profit and loss, because now that's overwhelmed me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
How do you think your business is different from others? Like, what sets your business apart?
Well, if I start with, because it's my industry, if I start with comparing it to other accounting firms,
Mm-hmm.
I think we're different because there's a lot of accounting firms out there that they are not good with the communication. So they're just giving you a product, like they're preparing your tax return or they're preparing your financial statements and they're sending it out there. We're different because we insist on meeting with our clients quarterly. We and a lot of a lot of places that I've worked at in the past, and a lot of colleagues that I have in other that own other businesses, they'll say, well, the client never got back to me, so I haven't heard from them in like a year. I mean, so that's a pretty poor excuse. So that's, I can just say, well, we provide more value than other businesses. But how do we do it? We insist on having a relationship with our clients. We insist on communicating with them a certain amount of times that's agreed on before we start our work, so that we really can say, yes, we are a trusted advisor to them, and we are working with them to achieve the goals that they have in their for their business.
I love that, trusted advisor. So if somebody, you mentioned a minute ago, and I was in agreement with you, that there are bookkeepers and accountants and coaches and anybody who truly understand the interior design industry, like, all the different facets. And then you've got those who say they do. If an interior designer was looking for an accounting firm, how would they be able to separate those who really know interior design industry, like your firm, versus an accountant or a bookkeeper who says, yeah, I understand that? What are some questions, or what are some things that they could do to ask, to kind of go a little bit deeper to see if they really know and understand, especially if the interior designer doesn't understand all of the financial accounting? You know what I mean? It's easy to be sold a bill of goods if you don't really know it. Are there any questions? What would you tell people to ask?
Well, if you're talking to the person, if it's a new relationship and you're almost interviewing the accountant to see, I would ask, first you can ask, how many clients do you work with in the industry? And if they say none, then there's your answer. If they say a few, you can just say, oh, great. So what softwares do your designers work with? So are they if you use let's just say, if you use Ivy or MyDoma or Design Manager, Studio, Web, there's quite a few of them. Are they saying ones, or are they just saying, oh yeah, they're all on QuickBooks Desktop? Because if they're saying that, then they don't know. Or you could say, have you ever heard of whatever software you use? Have you ever heard of that? What's your relationship like with other bookkeepers? How often do you talk? Like if you're going to hire a CPA to do the taxes and look over the accounting reports, and you have a bookkeeper more doing the day-to-day things that you understand, they understand the industry. You just say, like, how often do you talk to bookkeepers? Are you open to talking to a bookkeeper and reviewing everything? Because sometimes there's a lot of animosity between the two, and one person the bookkeeper might say, well, I know more than the CPA, or the CPA. So how good are you at communicating? Are you willing to communicate and stuff? And if you start with a couple of those specific questions, you can kind of tell right away if they actually, how much they actually know or work with clients in the design industry.
Yeah, those are really great questions. And, really understanding, I love that you even, acknowledge that there can be tension between bookkeeping and accounting. There doesn't have to be, let me say that, but there
Correct.
can be.
Yeah.
And I know even in my role, I work very closely with bookkeepers and accountants, number one, on the Profit First side, but also with all of my individual clients. They may all have a total range of bookkeepers and accountants, and it is not, unlikely that I would be jumping on the phone with their bookkeeper because there's something that we need, and there are like 5 ways to do it, and what's best for this particular client, and then I could easily jump on with the accountant. So making sure that they also have a team of people that can all work together, as we would say, play pretty in the sandbox together,
yeah,
is important for their team, because there is nothing worse than having infighting in your own team
Yeah,
of everybody trying to
absolutely.
kind of stake out their claim. And that's not good for anybody. And I know I worked with a client recently who they were having a cash flow crunch, and they called their accountant and said, we're having a cash flow crunch, assuming that as a trusted advisor, that their accounting firm, the person that they work with that pay a huge amount of money to, would be able to say, okay, let's talk about it. How can I help you? Or, here's some things we can look at. The accountant said, oh, okay. That was
Mm.
it. That was the end of the communication. Oh, okay. And this accounting firm is getting thousands of dollars a month from my client.
Jeez.
And I said to them, that is not an okay response. As a trusted advisor, right? They should be able to sit down and say, okay, let's look at your credit cards. Let's look at your inflow. Let's look at your outflow. What can we do? How can we help you prioritize? I said there were so many things that they could have and should have for the amount of money that you're paying them. You're not just paying for transactions. You are paying for assistance. You are paying for forward thinking, right? And
Absolutely.
they offered none of that to them. And so I would say if you're working with an accounting firm or even a bookkeeper that cannot offer you any kind of advice, all they want to do is be transactional, you either need to recognize that's what you have, or you need to maybe search out something different if you need more than that.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to search for someone new. And keep searching until you find someone that you have a comfortable feeling and you know that you can contact them and they're going to contact you back and they're going to listen to you and provide good advice to you.
Exactly. Because the numbers can be very overwhelming. I mean, that was, I get it. I get it. And many of our interior designers, they want to do the creative aspect. They want to focus on the pieces and parts that come very naturally to them. And even if this comes naturally, they're so busy with all the other things they need to do. They need to trust somebody to step in and help them with this piece. So I get that it can be overwhelming to have to seek out the right team. But when you do, it is going to be a weight lifted. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that there is certain, there are certain questions you can ask to get that feeling, but it's really important that you do. And then once you do, the other side of the story is once you do find that person that you're working with that can help you, there are certain things that I call like non-negotiable items that I'll have clients that I've had for years that'll say to me, why are you asking, Peter, just do it. Like, you do the financial part. Why are you asking these questions? And I'm like, that's where I have to say to them, nope, I'm sorry. This is non-negotiable. This is something that we have to review. Like, you
Right.
can't ignore this. This is something that you have to understand. And I'll explain it to you until you feel better about it. But I need you to focus and listen and be able to give me feedback as to what you think about this. Or else I'm running the whole company and not getting any input from the actual owner, that kind of thing. So
That brings up a really good point too, Peter, because, and I push this all the time. If our interior design clients are asking you a question or asking me a question, because like you said, I can talk to you about numbers and our eyes won't glaze over. We enjoy it, but that's not necessarily their area of enjoyment in their company. So if they ask us a question and we give them an answer and they don't understand,
mm-hmm.
I beg them to not just say, okay. I want them to keep pushing back until they understand it. Ask me to explain it another way. Ask me to give 4 examples. My goal and your goal is to really help them own that part of their business as the owners of the company. So they may not, again, have to do all the transactions or do it all in the nuts and bolts, but they do need to understand it. And our role as team members is to help them understand. And I know that we're both open and willing to go through it as many times as necessary for them to get it. And they really need to have that as part of the relationship with anybody they bring in to be a trusted advisor.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so what are some of the first questions that you get from interior designers? What are some of the first things they ask you when they hand you their books? Sometimes I get asked, is it really bad? Or, what does this look like? Or what does this mean? And so what is that? And what are some of the first numbers that you look at? Like, what's the first thing that you look at?
So a lot of times when a new client will come in and I'll say, can I look at your books and see what they are? And assuming that they have been doing the bookkeeping, they'll say, well, I look at it, but I have X amount of dollars in my bank account. I only have one bank account, and I have no idea if I should be taking any money out personally. I don't know how much I've made. I don't know anything. And I think that's it's good when they have a lot of money in their bank account and they haven't spent it, because now it's like, okay, now we can break that down and figure out exactly what's going on, and then I can tell you how much money you could be using on your own for profit. It's bad when the person's like, I have no money and I don't I don't even know what I owe or what I don't know, that kind of thing. So what I look at to keep it simple, absolutely, like not to complicate things at all, but quickly, if someone shows me a balance sheet and they have a bookkeeper and they're like, everything's reconciled but I still don't understand this, I look at how much cash they have in all their bank accounts, and I go down and look at what their balance of their credit card is, and I try to figure out whether or not it's plus or minus. That's the fastest way of doing things. And if it's a minus, then I know that it looks like, okay, well, we want
We
that
got some work to do.
yeah, we got some work to do. So that's how we start. Okay, where are we here? If it's plus, that's great. Now we're in a good position. Hopefully there's, that money isn't going to be tied up and have to be paid in somewhere else. But that's just a quick thing that I do when I see, a balance sheet for the first time, and I'm trying to figure out, if they're not sure what's going on, trying to figure out where they're at. How much money do they have in the bank, and what is their credit card balance?
Exactly, because in this industry, that credit card balance, it increases very quickly. And
Absolutely. Yep.
there's nothing worse than, we probably have seen our fair share of balance sheets that have, 50, 60, $80,000 going to credit cards, and you got about 18 sitting in a bank account.
Absolutely.
And you don't have a long receivables list.
Yeah.
That's the worst. I usually ask for, let me see the receivables and let me see the payables, because there could be quite a lot of others. And that immediately makes my stomach drop for them. The other thing that I like to look at in addition to that, and I would agree, I look at the same thing. And then I always ask them, or they will, here's the comment I get. You see that number on net profit or net income down on my P&L? That looks like a good number, but I have no idea where that money is because it's not in my bank account. As if it's a static number and it should be sitting, they should be able to go to the balance sheet and see it. And so then we have to have a really deep discussion on what does that number really mean. And let me show you where it is on the balance sheet. Let me show you where you can find it. Here's where the money went. And sometimes that's a painful process sometimes, just to come face to face to where did the money really go.
Yep, absolutely.
So we're kind of looking at the beginning of the year here. We're in first quarter as we are recording this. And so, this is a time that people are looking at their financial documents. They're thinking about, like I had a call even right before I started our podcast with somebody going, I need a new accountant, I need a new bookkeeper. I get those calls multiple times a week. They're looking at all of this. They're looking at what type of business should I have, an LLC, a sole proprietor, an S Corp, C Corp, who should I be, what should I be? They're figuring it out. Mm-hmm. And that's not something that you should take lightly. I mean, not everybody should jump out and go start filing as an S Corp. Not everybody should go be a C Corp. There are things we really need to think about and consider. And I know I've heard you speak about this, and I would be curious, and I know that our listeners would as well, is how would they start the investigation into the process to determine what type of business type they should be?
Well, the most common one to start, most people will set up if they're on their own and they don't have any partners, they'll set up a single member LLC, and they'll be a sole proprietor. And the reason why most people do that is because it's the easiest way to set up. It's the less expensive as far as fees are concerned and that kind of thing. And then they start out that way and they're growing. And some people, if they're not using an accountant, they might not even know that an S Corp or is even available. So what we do is I always say that when you're looking at your P&L, and at the end of your P&L, when you get to net income or net profit, once you start to get around $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on an annual basis, and you know you're growing, you're rocking and rolling, you keep growing, and your plan, that plan is for that number to always, keep increasing. That's only going to get higher. If you're working with a CPA, a tax specialist, hopefully they tell you that at some point and they start to talk to you about the S Corp. But if they haven't, and you see your P&L and that's the numbers you're looking at, you just want to contact your tax accountant and just say, hey, I'm just wondering, like, what would be, when would we start talking about the switch? And if we did switch, what would that mean for me and my business? And see what they say. And if they don't get back to you, or if they say, oh, you're too little to be an S Corp, I don't know, then you know that you have someone who's not going to look out for you when that moment comes, if that makes sense. So then you can start searching for someone else if that's something that you want to do. But I always say that if you look at your P&L and you're looking at 30, 40, 50,000, you're growing, you're going to have more projects, you're only going to get bigger, start hiring employees, part-time, full-time, get them on payroll. We're going to, if you were my client, we'd be doing an analysis and showing you what the difference would be if you kept it the way it is versus switching to an S Corp.
That's great. I know that's the same process. I started off as a sole proprietor and then quickly realized I needed to be an LLC just for the, the liability piece of it. Moved to an LLC, sat there for a few years, and I'm an S Corp now as well. But one of the things that we did when I was doing the analysis, my accountant was doing the analysis, we were working on it together, is not even just, and this is something that I think is really important, and I sometimes have to share it with my clients. We're not just looking at what are you potentially saving in taxes, but there are some additional costs for S Corps that you don't have for LLCs in a lot of situations when you're looking at extra documents that need to be filed, payroll. And so it's, there is also a point, at least there was in my business and some that I've worked with, where if I'm only looking at tax savings, let's say that I've got 30,000, and not saying this is the number, I'm just using it as an example, but let's say that 30,000 was my net income, net profit, and I look to make the switch. If I'm only looking at the tax implication, it's going to look like I might save money. But when I add in all the additional accounting and bookkeeping fees that I would have to do as an S Corp, it actually may not be at 30,000. It may be for my business at 40, 50, 60,000.
Exactly.
And so, I get a little outdone with accountants that are not willing to do that full analysis and add in the additional fees that come with filling out, even at the end of the year, all the extra stuff, because I pay more now to do, quarterly taxes and quarterly payroll. It costs a whole lot more than as an LLC where I could just stroke a check and send it in as an estimated tax payment. There's a whole different setup. And so, yes, I have tax savings, but I also wanted it to be tax savings outside of the extra costs that were associated with being an S Corp. And so I say that because, and it sounds like you're in agreement, there is an analysis and it's not the same number for every business type. And so anybody who says, here's the number, it's got to be this number, without looking at your business and looking at those costs, that would make me raise a flag that they're not looking at my business, my costs, where I am, what I'm doing, and even the state that I'm in where there are different regulations per state on some of these things. So just really make sure that you're working with, again, a trusted advisor, an accountant who can sit down and run those numbers. And my accountant is very much like you, Peter. She's excellent. And so she sits down and runs those numbers and says, here's what you're saving in taxes. Here's the additional that you're going to be paying for accounting assistance, right, for this. So here is either what you're really saving or what you're not, because you can't just willy-nilly each year switch back and forth. There are limits around if you switch and then you switch back, you got to wait 5 years. I mean, this isn't just this year I think I'm going to make more money, I'll switch over. Oh, next year I think I'll switch back. That is not the way that works.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. So what I was saying was when you should start to think about it, but you want to make sure that you have someone doing that. Absolutely. Because if you become an S Corp, that's 2 tax returns that need to be done. You need to set yourself up as an employee, even though you're the owner, you're now an employee, which means now you're on payroll. So that's what we'll do. We'll show We'll show what we think a reasonable salary, it's called, with the, not to get too complicated, but we'll
Right.
show that and what you're saving in taxes. Then we subtract all the costs so that before a decision, before a piece of paper or a form is even started to be filled out in order to make the switch, you see the net effect of what it is. And then, because I've had clients where I show them, I'm like, I can save you $4,000 in taxes, but at this point, it would cost another $2,000 or $3,000 in fees. And they're like, well, so the net amount really isn't that. So maybe let's revisit that next year and see how much more my business actually is. I think it's going to grow this much, but I'm not really sure. I'm just starting out. I don't know. And then the good news is that it can be switched at any time during the year. So if your business is growing a heck of a lot more than you thought, and it does make sense, and you're like, oh, I don't want to, man, I blew it. I blew it. It's the middle of the year. I don't want to wait till next year. You don't have to. So it can be switched at any time when the time is right to do it.
Yeah, I just know I've seen a few accountants who only showed the tax savings and didn't do that extra step.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, it ended up costing my clients more, and they didn't understand why. And they kept saying, but the accountant told me I needed to be an S corp. And I'm like, yeah. And did they tell you about all these extra fees, which are not unreasonable fees for the work that they're doing, but that needs to fit into the analysis. And so
exactly. So sometimes, yeah, exactly. So when you're saving in taxes as an accountant, as a tax geek, I say, I can see that on the tax return. But if I don't explain that to you and you're waiting till next year to get a bigger refund, or you didn't have to pay as much in an estimated tax payment as you thought, when you're giving actual cash out of your business for the cost of another return, or you're giving cash out of your business for payroll every time you run payroll, you're thinking, man, I don't know. I didn't get a check for this yet. It didn't come in, but I know I'm spending my money and it's going out. So without that proper explanation, some people are like, man, I think this was, this could be a mistake. So yeah, and that all goes back to what we were saying about communication too, and making sure that you're communicating with your clients so that they understand what you're trying to do to help them.
Exactly. I love how you start the analysis at 30, because I think the fun thing about that is when you see the analysis, you can actually see what you're working towards. So if I want this to work, maybe in my business, 50 is the number that is kind of the number where it's past the break even. So it's worth all the extra work, right? Exactly. And so now you kind of have this goal to work towards. And you at least see it, it's out there. And then, once your business grows even more and more and more, there are other things like that, tax advantages, defined benefit programs, there are all these other opportunities that if you don't even know they're out there, you don't even know to work for them, you don't even know how to make them happen. And so having that advisor who can tell you, look, this may be where you are, but here are some other ways when you grow, here are some other things that might open up for you. Just even having that conversation of, as we've even talked about, don't put the ceiling. Just know that there is no ceiling. You get to keep going. Here are other things. That is just worth its weight in gold, to have somebody who's going to have that kind of discussion with you all along, because that means they are invested in making your business work for you.
Absolutely.
So do you see anything, we're in 2019 as we're recording, and we're getting ready to go through an entirely different type of tax season for a multitude of reasons, not just because we are currently in the middle of a government shutdown, but also because, many of our tax laws have shifted and changed and are honestly, from my understanding, still being kind of worked out at the micro detail level.
Yes.
And so, it's not like we sometimes think, those of us not in accounting, we may think, okay, well, the tax bill went into effect last year, so everything was decided. And that is not the way it works.
No.
And it will still be probably being worked out for, more time to come. But what are some of the things that we might need that are new on the horizon that maybe we need to be thinking about this year that potentially in the past we haven't had to think about quite the same?
Well, so yeah, you're absolutely right. And a lot of these new rules for business owners are, if I look at my software right now, it says the qualified business deduction is still being worked on. I don't know how they word it, but basically, the permanent it's still vague, and we're still not sure. So we understand
Is that
most of it.
20% that you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can't, we're not going to be able to file a tax return until whatever, it gets resolved at some point. But let's just say, so as a business owner, most business owners that are not to get too complicated in the numbers or anything like that, but let me just say that most business owners are potentially eligible to save quite a bit of money on their taxes. Most people in general they'll see a tax rate decrease, which is nice. And there's different things that are happening. So it's an interesting time to make sure that if you do have a tax professional, that they're looking at tax planning for you as we go on throughout the year. Now that the rates are down, I've seen even strategies where we're not like worrying about deferring so much income, where it's almost like seeing strategies where it's okay to have a higher taxable amount than you would want because the rates are lower. So not to get too complicated, but
Right.
they are projecting this simple, with the new tax law, it's going to be simple and a postcard and, simple. And you see these commercials with the tax preparer software and everything's simple and free and blah, 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 blah. But I would say that now is the most, it's the first time since 1986 that they did a major overhaul of the tax law. And if you were ever thinking about investing money and having a partner in the tax to help you with taxes, now's the time, because believe it or not, I've been doing this for 18 years and it is the most complex that it's ever been, certainly in my career.
That you're right. You're so right, Peter. And again, like you, I don't even know all the details because I'm not in it, but I know enough to know from talking with my accountant, even things like the differentiation between potentially product and service and how our income comes in, could be impacted. There's also this tiered approach, 20% is only good based on what your adjusted gross income is. Where do you fall in? And so it's more than just can the business, it may be that the business would be eligible, but as a family, you're not eligible. So
we're even just the simple word of consultant.
Yes.
Is now a very vague term, believe it or not, in the
Correct.
tax world. So for us tax geeks that have been kind of trying to, we spent the second half of last year trying to sit in classes, and every class that I've ever sat in throughout the years, we call it tax camp, and as dorky as it sounds, and I would sit there and, at least we would get answers like, this is what's going to change, and, whatever. Every class that I took last year, believe it or not, the teacher was like, this is what we think is going to happen, and this is what probably will happen, but it's still temporary, and they haven't got, and it's all vague. And it's like, man, I just spent a ton of money sitting in classes just to find out that this, what we're talking about, may or may not happen, and we're really not sure when it's going to get resolved,
right?
And what the answer is.
It's so very nuanced is what is the conversations I've been having, because I've been asking questions. I'm a consultant. I have product. I have service. I'm looking at where do we fit on the tax brackets, and so I'm constantly asking these questions. And my accountant keeps saying the same thing. I went to the meeting. They said it could go this way. It could go that way.
And
it could go this way. It could, and I kept going. So what are we going to know? And she's like, I don't really know.
I don't know. And you know what? As an accountant that is proactive, that tries to do the best for my customers, and that has been doing it as long as I have been doing, it is extremely uncomfortable to tell my clients I don't know.
Right.
Because I want to know, and I'm trying to know, and I still don't know. So, and this was all this uncomfortableness that I had was all before the government shutdown. So now, this is going to be one of the most unique tax seasons that in a while. So.
You're using a really nice term. I'm thinking this is going to be crazy.
Oh God, I'm just trying to be as positive as I can at this point, because it's stressful. It's a stressful time for an accountant anyway. but when you add a bunch of uncertainties to that,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I could kind of tell you, like, this is how a tax season will work, and this is what we do, and it's a lot of work, but then we get through it.
Yeah.
I don't know. So we just wait and hear, and try to get nuggets out there and figure out when more stuff is going to get released to get more clarification on it, and maybe it'll get resolved, and then in the summertime or the fall, it'll be more in those quieter times during the year. On a normal year, we'll be able to use that advantage to do more tax planning to catch up and make sure that our clients are getting the full advantages of the new law.
Exactly. So if there's ever a time to have our numbers in order, our books in order, and to work with a tax professional, this
Oh
is
my
that
gosh.
time.
So yeah. Yep, absolutely.
This is that time.
The first time since the mid '80s that I would say is, you can't afford to not to do it on your own at this point.
Right. I would 100% agree with that. I mean, and here I am, the person who loves all this, right? And I literally pre-do my taxes before I give them to my accountant to see if we come out with about the same numbers, because
that's cool.
Because I'm weird like that. And so when I bring every accountant I've ever had, when I give them everything, their comment is kind of like, so why did you hire me? And I'm like, because you're really good at what you do. And I want to just make sure this isn't what I know. It's just like, I enjoy it. And I know I'm weird that way. But I still wouldn't take my own numbers and turn them in.
Yeah.
I'm going to go through, and I say that because even if I would sit and pre-work it out, and I even do all my estimated taxes every quarter before I send them to her, and then wait to see what she sends back. I always go with her numbers and we have a conversation, but it just helps me stay in touch. But I would still never turn mine in without having that person that I trust that's keeping up with all the tiny details that I cannot keep up with. And so I am in total agreement that having that professional is so important, so very important. So
absolutely.
So Peter, if you could offer one piece of advice to help those in the interior design industry be more profitable as they're thinking about their accounting and all of that, what would you offer?
I would say that if you are doing big projects where you're getting a lot of, and most interior designers are, if you're at the point where you're getting large sums of money up front from the client after you give them a contract, don't spend a large sum of money before you talk to your bookkeeper or your accountant or your CPA, and just make sure that that money you are spending for whatever reason is should be going to where you're spending it to, I guess is the best way to do it. Because if you ask before spending, then you're in a better position. It's the people that spend the money and then ask afterwards, and then it's like, no, you needed that for other stuff, and now we're in trouble. So I would say, with large sums of money, make sure you're communicating with your trusted advisors and making sure that you're spending it on the right things.
Absolutely, because and I teach that same philosophy in the Profit First education and everything else that I do, simply because in many cases we've not earned that money yet, and so we have to be very careful that we are spending money that our company has earned in a proper way. And so having those discussions beforehand is important, because if not, that's when we end up with that balance sheet that has an $18,000 in the bank and $80,000 on a credit card.
Exactly.
And that's where we don't want to be. So what's one of your next big profit goals?
What's one of my next big profit goals? You know what? We were talking earlier about the E-Myth and the technician thing, and as an accountant, I still do too much technical work. So at this point, one of my profit goals for 2019 is just to grow more in order to be able to afford that next great employee, and finding that next great employee that's going to give my clients the same value I give to them, and I know that they're going to concentrate more on the technical work and doing all that, so that I can work on my business instead of in my business. So instead of just blocking certain times out and making sure that I'm doing it, I want to make sure that I'm spending more time doing things like we're doing now and getting out there and communicating with people that I haven't met yet.
Oh, I love that. I think that's so important. One of the reasons I always ask this question too, Peter, is because no matter how long we've been in business, I've had my own company since 2000. No matter how long, we always are growing. We're always striving to be more profitable, and profitability is not always meaning I want to make more, money for me. It might be profitability of having another employee, profitability of how I want my employees to feel. It could be, defined in so many different ways. So I love the way that you have shared that it's to be able to kind of pull yourself a little more out of that day to day and be more of the manager entrepreneur of your own firm.
Yep, that's the goal.
Now, Peter, you and I are getting ready to be able to celebrate Luann Nagara's new book, What I Learned from a Well-Designed Business, the Power Talk Friday Experts Edition. You and I are both in there. We've both written chapters. So for all the financial and numbers geeks, they'll have 2 great chapters to read, right?
Yes.
But we're also going to be participating in the Luann Nagara Live. It's about the conversation, March the 30th through April the 1st. And we want everybody to come join us.
Yeah, it's going to be a great time in Short Hills, New Jersey, and it's going to be 3 days of action-packed learning for all of us. So it's going to be a great time.
Yeah, and you and I'd even made the comment before we started the podcast that we're going to learn a lot there too. So don't think that the experts won't also learn by being there. That's the beautiful thing I think about the way that this event has been put together, is that you're almost going to get to have this broad sweep of every single aspect of your business in one, short 2.5 day opportunity. And it is rare that you get to hit, the finances, the bookkeeping, the accounting, the marketing, the social media, the client relationships, the HR piece. It is rare that you would ever have an opportunity to seriously hit all of it and hit it from an expert's perspective as well as somebody in the trenches, right? Because one of the fun ways that we're going to be sharing is almost like a live podcast. Luann will be live on stage, and then, she'll have an expert, and she'll also have a designer who is kind of living what we're talking about. And so just having all those different viewpoints is so enriching.
Absolutely. I'm sure we're all going to leave with our heads spinning, but in a good way when it's over. And the takeaways for how to grow our businesses, it's going to be awesome.
It is. It's going to be a lot of fun. And Darla and Natalie from Weengnut Social are going to be there. And that's going to be fun because they're going to be emceeing it. And they're hysterical. So I just can't imagine that it's not going to be just a blast. So if anybody's interested, you can go to my website. There'll be a link that will take you there. You can go to Luann's website, but there are plenty of ways to find that. We'll have a link in the show notes as well. So Peter, where can people find you?
My website is www.thedesignercpa.com, and you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Designer CPA as well.
Excellent. Well, Peter, I really appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for sharing. And I just have to say, I'm so excited to get to talk to a numbers person.
Yeah, this is going to be great. And thank you so much for having me on. This has been awesome.
You're welcome. Talk soon. Thanks again to Peter for sharing on the podcast today. If you want to join us live at Luann Nagara Live, it's about the conversation in March the 30th through April the 1st in New Jersey. Head over to my website. You can click on the link. It's on the front page of my site. And while you're there at scarletthreadconsulting.com, click on the purple bar at the top, take a quick health checkup for your business financials, and it will help you decide what your next step might be in making this year better than the last. Remember, stay focused on your financials, and don't forget, profit doesn't happen by accident.